After the long flight and a meeting that lasted the whole afternoon, Lu Jinyan looked exhausted. Sitting in his office, he casually took out the phone he had on silent while listening to his assistant report his schedule. Just as he was about to lock his phone, a message came in. Lu Jinyan smoothly clicked it open. To the end of time, filming completed. There'll be a celebratory banquet tonight at 8 p.m. in Jianghu Hotel. Do drop by if you have the time. Lu Jinyan's assistant had been working for him for many years, hence he was well acquainted with his boss' aloof personality. Unperturbed by Lin Jinyan's lack of concern, he continued, Mr. Lu, there are about 6 hours before the airplane takes off. Would you like to have dinner in the city or at the airport? 1. In the city, Lu Jinyan replied faintly. Before his assistant could ask about the location, he continued, Jianghu Hotel. When Lu Jinyan and his assistant finished their meal, it was already 8:30 p.m. They footed the bill before proceeding to the main door. Just as they reached it, Lu Jinyan stopped. His assistant stopped immediately as well. Mr. Lu, is something wrong? Lu Jinyan remained silent for a while, and just when his assistant was started debating whether or not to repeat the question, he replied, wait for me in the car, I have something to do upstairs. He stood at the main door for a few more seconds before turning towards the lift. As part of the crew in To the End of Time, Xiao Anhao was naturally at the dinner. The minute she reached the city, she had hurriedly bathed, changed her clothes, done her hair, and applied light makeup before rushing to Jianghu Hotel. Despite preparing in record time, Xiao Anhao was still late for the dinner. When she reached To the End of Time, director was already on the stage, addressing the crowd, expressing his gratitude. Since everyone was focused on the director, no one noticed Xiao Anhao's late arrival. She stood in the crowd, looking around before making a beeline for her manager Zhao Meng. After the director's brief speech, the dinner began. Since it was a banquet, socializing and alcohol were customary. Xiao Anhao wasn't an A-lister in the industry, but her pretty face, perfect figure, good personality, and eloquence allowed her to shine, so she fit in perfectly. Xiao Anhao was starving by the time she greeted everyone in the banquet. Without hesitation, she pulled Zhao Meng towards the buffet area. She filled her plate before randomly sitting down near a window. After a few bites, the originally boisterous banquet hall suddenly fell silent. Xiao Anhao lifted her head in curiosity as she continued to munch on her food. Following the direction of the crowd's gaze, she saw Lu Jinyan. The memory from 3 months ago resurfaced. She remembered getting strangled by Lu Jinyan after climbing into his bed. Xiao Anhao, are you trying to play with me? Good, Xiao Anhao, you want to play? I'll play till the end. The grip she had on the chopsticks unconsciously tightened, and her heart pounded. He must have been very angry that day to have said such things. For the past 3 months, she had been hiding from him. Despite her efforts, she still met him in the end. Dressed in a well-fitted black suit, Lu Jinyan's tall and trim physique was accentuated. As the bright lights in the banquet hall fell on his face, his Originally exquisite facial features became three-dimensional. His sharp nose, bridge, thin lips, strong brows were dazzling. The entertainment industry was saturated with good-looking people. One could easily pick out an entertainer that would stand out in the crowd. However, Lu Jinyan was not just that, he possessed a unique charisma that would capture anyone's attention, easily making him the focal point anywhere. Silence fell in the room the minute he arrived. To the end of time, director was the first to come back to his senses. With a glass of wine in hand, he enthusiastically welcomed Lu Jinyan, Mr. Lu. The atmosphere gradually heated up after the director had spoken. Even though it was clear to everyone that their greetings wouldn't be reciprocated, it didn't stop them from greeting him. Lu Jinyan strolled towards the seating area as though no one had spoken to him. Even though it was just a short stroll, he was still able to captivate everyone's attention. The director held on to the wine, fawning all over Lu Jinyan with a smile plastered on his face. Xiaoan was eating in the seating area. Initially, when she was still a distance away from him with the crowd shielding her, she had the courage to look at him. But as he came closer, she only dared to sneak occasional peeks. Chopsticks, no longer as carefree as before. Chairman Lu, why didn't you inform us that you were coming? I could have gotten someone to escort you. When the director's words reached Xiao Anhao's ears, she distinctly felt Lu Jinyan walking towards her. Unconsciously, she tightened the grip on her chopsticks and straightened her back into a rod. As she focused on her plate of food, even her chewing started to slow, becoming careful. When Lu Jinyan finally walked past her and Xiao Anhao was preparing to heave a sigh of relief, she realized that he had sat down in a chair behind her. When Xiao Anhao first fell in love with Lu Jinyan, her dreams were constantly filled with him. As time went by, she became afraid of seeing him. Whenever he was near her, she would be drowned in fear and anxiety. And these feelings only intensified after the events 3 months ago. At this very moment, Lu Jinyan was sitting behind her. All her senses heightened as she grew aware of his voice and his breath. Her palms got soaked with sweat from her anxiety. Lu Jinyan and the director's conversation centered around movies and dramas. Even though Lu Jinyan didn't say much, Xiao Anhao's heart trembled at his every word. No longer able to withstand the pressure, Xiao Anhao put down her chopsticks, threw the excuse of toilet to Zhao Meng, and stood up. But the moment she stood up, Lu Jinyan stood up as well. Was it a coincidence or was it deliberate? The washroom was behind Xiao Anhao and the dining hall exit was behind Lu Jinyan. Hence, just as she turned, he turned as well. Their gazes collided. Just a glance at Lu Jinyan caused Xiao Anhao to frantically lower her head, avoiding his eyes. Xiao Anhao clenched her fists tightly, trying to calm her rapidly pounding heart, attempting to act like everyone else, as though they were indeed strangers. She greeted him politely, "Good evening, Mr. Lu." Lu Jinyan remained straight-faced, not moving, his gaze uncertain, giving the impression that he hadn't heard Xiao Anhao's greeting at all. After a long while, he suddenly blinked. Turning, he took a detour before taking long strides out the dining hall. From the very beginning, he hadn't taken a single glance at Xiao Anhao, as though the woman in front of him wasn't the wife he had married 5 months ago. Lu Jingyan had a cold and aloof personality that made it difficult for others to get close. His authority in the entertainment industry further instilled fear in others, forcing them to behave carefully around him. The moment he left the dining hall, the atmosphere gradually heightened, returning to the boisterous affair of before his arrival. But because he had come, people naturally started gossiping about him. Lu Jingyan is indeed a legend of the industry. He's not just a legend, he is an unbelievable miracle. For the past 10 years, since his debut, there wasn't any gossip or backlash. He has also built his own empire from scratch. It's said that he entered the industry as a poor boy without any background. After 4 years, his fame skyrocketed, and he clinched the Best Male Actor award for 6 consecutive years. Out of the 10 movies voted online as classics, he appeared in 6, in only 2 of them not as the lead. Thought that he would go down together with the company, but in just 3 short years, he actually developed Huaning into the biggest entertainment company in the country. Which a lister in the industry isn't from Huaning nowadays? But I heard that he has an aloof personality, doesn't like interacting with others and likes to do everything by himself. Though in terms of looks, ability, and acting skills, he's definitely at the top. He's no doubt worthy of the nation's husband title bestowed on him. I wonder who this nation's husband will marry in the end. Now that you mention it, he debuted at 18, so he should be 28 now. Reasonably speaking, even if he doesn't get married, he should at least have a girlfriend. Why haven't there been any gossip? Yes. Girlfriend aside, he doesn't even have a female that he's intimate or close with. Such a mystery. Or maybe he doesn't like girls. Listening to their endless chatter, Zhao Meng couldn't hold back her curiosity. Lifting her head, she asked Xiao Anhao, who was directly in front of her. Stirring her cup of coffee, why is he back in Beijing? Isn't his movie still ongoing? Even though their marriage was kept a secret, Xiao Anhao still told Zhao Meng, who was not only her manager but also a long-time best friend. Hence, Xiao Anhao immediately understood who she was talking about, even though Zhao Meng didn't specifically mention Lu Jingyan. Her hands stopped momentarily. Looking up and into her friend's eyes, she shook her head, saying honestly, I don't know. You don't know? Zhao Meng looked incredulous. Miss Xiao Anhao, are you even his wife? He didn't even call to notify you when he came back from Rome? Xiao Anhao continued to shake her head. He didn't. Just then, Zhao Meng suddenly remembered that when her friend had bumped into Lu Jingyan, he didn't even bother looking at her. At that time, she had thought that they were trying to cover up their marriage, but now, she realized that it wasn't the case. Zhao Meng frowned, continuing, are you guys like that? In private? How often do you two talk? Xiao Anhao looked down, not speaking. She and Lu Jinyan weren't interacting. In private. In the 5 months they had been married, they spoke 3 times. The last time being the scolding from 3 months ago when she climbed into his bed. 3 months? Zhao Meng widened her eyes in shock. Miss Xiao Anhao? Are you his wife or his mistress? No, you're worse than a mistress. A mistress would at least get benefits, but what have you gotten? Look at what you're wearing, which item costs more than a 5-digit sum? And with the authority he yields, he could easily groom you into an A-lister, but instead he gave you a small role in, to the end of time. Xiao Anhao remained silent, her heart trembling with Zhao Meng's ruthless words. It was the truth, she was indeed worse than a mistress. Even though both roles included sleeping with a guy, a mistress had to be of interest to the man at the very least. But Lu Jinyan was infuriated after she had slept with him. Xiao Anhao lifted the coffee and downed a big gulp, suppressing the bitterness. Biting at her calmly, as though she were speaking about someone else, she said, "You should know we were forced to get married. There were no feelings involved, lack of communication is normal." Zhao Meng and Xiao Anhao have known each other since young, so even though their interests and hobbies differed, they still had a close relationship. Hence, regarding some matters, Zhao Meng understood. She was silent for a long while, staring at Xiao Anhao, who remained impassive. Finally, she took a deep breath. Xiao, during middle and high school, there weren't many girls who could talk to him, but you were one of them. He treated you well and had even gone out to play with you several times. Why did you suddenly stop interacting in college? Why did you start treating each other as strangers that had never met before? Many a time he would treat you impatiently, not minding his language. What exactly happened? What happened? Xiao Anhao slipped into a trance. She stared at her coffee for a long while before shaking her head slowly. Softly she whispered, "I don't know. All this while, I've been desperately wondering what exactly happened that year." The minute his assistant saw him, he immediately came out to open the back door. Lu Jinyan entered the car wordlessly. While closing the door, his assistant raised his head to peek at his boss' expression, only to find his face tight with his lips clenched into a straight line. The assistant definitely hadn't expected